Hi everyone, my name is Christina Noel, and this is our first ever Arc Benders Real Talk.
Woo.
Woo! So in these Real Talks, we're going to explore what does it really take to change the world, and we're going to have real talks about the highs, the lows, everything in between. And I am here with Liz Tracy.
Yay.
Oh my gosh, one of my favorite Arc Benders in the world. Anytime there's anything inspiring going on in North Carolina, it's typically Liz Tracy that's behind it. And from there, I'm gonna let her introduce herself because there's no way I can do you justice for your awesomeness.
Oh, what an introduction. Hey everyone, my name's Liz. For the past 5.5 years, I was the director at HQ Raleigh, which is a co-working space for startups in downtown Raleigh. We also have a location in Greensboro and then a partnership in Charlotte and Wilmington. So really trying to connect all of North Carolina. But we were the first B Corp certified co-working space in North Carolina and the second B Corp co-working space brand in the United States to get certified. So it was a tough row to hoe, but we did it. And we got the opportunity to work with so many startups in the space and really give them the opportunity to see firsthand what it means to be a B Corp and the process to do that. So I just left in December and I'm getting ready to start a PhD in organizational behavior. It's an industrial organizational psychology degree at NC State.
Cool. So you've done so much. I mean, you basically, I still remember you back at HQ. I mean, how many years did it take to get B Corp certified? Well, and in your case, you were in a challenging situation. So sometimes, based on the business model, the certification's easier to pursue. So if you have a built-in business model that's a social enterprise, it's easier. But in your case, it was a co-working space, so like a traditional co-working space.
So we started the B Corp process like 3 months after we started. So when we first kicked off HQ, B Lab had a presence in North Carolina. We went to an event, we learned about it, and we said we really want to do this. So it was basically 2.5 years after that we kind of stamped the seal of approval for B Corp. But yeah, I think it was tough because we didn't have a product, we didn't have a supply chain. We were a service-based company, and a lot of where we were giving our kind of give back was opening our space up, and there weren't necessarily areas to capture that type of impact that HQ was doing. And so it took us a little bit of time to kind of navigate the best way to handle that and really display the work that we were doing at HQ.
So what was the low-hanging fruit that you did find at HQ? So like what were the little things that you did to get B Corp certified that made an impact?
So we were really strategic about bringing in help. We had a B Corp and operations intern every semester.
I remember that. Nice.
And they were fantastic. I highly recommend it to anybody who is going through this process. But we really looked at their skill sets to figure out, okay, you know, this person has a background in environmental science. Why don't we pull them in to do our environmental management policy? So we tried to pull on the skills of those interns too to really maximize documentation. And we are also trying to make it a habit. So, you know, we had over 300 people in our space who were not our employees, they were members. And so we can't tell everybody what they have to do.
Yep.
We can't hold anything over their head, but what we can do is we can build it into the fabric of the way that we built HQ. And they talk about habit building, you know, it takes like 70 repetitions. So if we could build it in slowly, then people could get accustomed to certain things, and then all of a sudden it becomes a habit for everybody in the space. So that was a lot of things like in the cafe. So composting, and we used noodles instead of coffee stir sticks.
Yeah, I love that.
So we tried to bring some humor in it too, so that, you know, don't leave your noodle in there, become spaghetti, so that people don't get to the bottom of their coffee cup and see this like noodle that's like slithering around. So
Yeah, and you were pretty good. I still remember was there any paper products other than compostables?
We really tried to minimize that as much as we could.
Which is impactful.
Yeah.
So anyways, so why at this point in your journey are you thinking a PhD?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is something that I've thought about for a while. I had an opportunity to get exposure to a lot of industrial organizational psychologists through the work at HQ. We had a couple who were working actually for startups in our space. And so a lot of what HQ was about was human behavior. How do you get, 150 companies that all work for themselves to coexist in one space? And so trying to understand the processes that you create and the way that you train a team to kind of embrace that and onboard people into that environment was always really interesting to me. And so I would go to a lot of these IO psychologists and ask them questions and get insight. And I wanted to have that knowledge base myself. And so I think after working with startups for a number of years and working pretty intimately with them as they went from idea to growth, the team is so important. And developing that team can be really hard, especially when it's in your head. And it's your passion and you're trying to bring that into that beginning stage team. And so trying to understand that more deeply so that we can get more teams to be successful and think about the impact that they can have in setting up the right working environment.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, so it should be exciting for sure.
Yay! So only to switch gears a little bit. So you've done so much. So both at HQ and we've talked about this a little bit already off camera, but changing the world's so hard. And so real talk, how do you balance self-care? Like what's in your mind for the next chapter in your journey? And how do you avoid burnout as someone who's trying to change the world?
It's a really tough question. Burnout is real.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that slowly seeps in. And all of a sudden you hit the wall and you realize, oh wow, something has to change.
Yeah.
For me, I think I rely really heavily on a good group of people around me. So I have a group of girlfriends that we get together at least once a quarter and do like personal and professional check-in where we can be really real with each other and just kind of, you can't just come with a problem. They force you to have a solution by the end of that discussion. So having people who you trust, but also who are not going to let you get away with things, I think is really helpful and has been incredibly helpful for me over the past 3 years as I've worked with this group of women. And I think just having a really supportive family. My family's all in California, which can be really hard. But we prioritize and make time for each other several times a year. And so having to kind of close everything down and make sure that I focus on that helps me kind of reimagine what is important. Not reimagine, but refocus and re-energize and say, okay, when everything else is gone in the world, relationships are the thing that matter most.
I love that. So next question, one of my favorite questions, although it's kind of a heavy one, but I think I think it's leaning into the mess. Is like, what are the biggest obstacles, especially with HQ, or even personally, that you've had to overcome in being an arc bender and changing the world, and how did you overcome them?
I think one big one is learning not to say yes to everything.
So painful though. Yeah.
When there's like so many shiny objects, and I think sometimes we underestimate how much time it takes to make change, and that it doesn't happen overnight, and that small steps and small processes can actually go a long way. And so I think sometimes we see, okay, this needs to happen. I remember with HQ in particular, when we were trying to get the B Corp certification, was like, oh yeah, we just need to do this, 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 and this, and then we'll be done. And that took 2.5 years.
That's all.
Yeah, that's all. That's it. You know, like this, this,
Yeah.
this, and this. And so, at first I was getting really frustrated because I was like, well, like, why we need to push this along. I want this to happen. And I started to embrace bringing people in to support us. And that's when we started bringing in interns to help with the documentation process along the way. And just having people help you along with those steps can make change happen a lot faster, but it can't just be me saying yes to everything. And it can't be me putting all the energy in. You really have to bring a team of people around you, and trust in that team of people.
I love that you say that. That is something as a solopreneur, a recent solopreneur, I'm now working on. I actually got talked into trying to form an advisory board last week because it's the same thing. I'm like, oh, how do I make this decision? And a mentor was like, you shouldn't have to make a decision yourself. Like, you need to get help.
Yeah.
And I've been getting help, but I think I need more collective help. And
Yeah, and I think sometimes even organizations who have a board of advisors sometimes need to be creative and think outside the box to maybe have a board of advisors for social or environmental decisions.
Ooh,
So
I like that.
I think advisory boards can be so helpful to getting a different perspective, even if it's not a formal board, in the sense that it's, you know, your nonprofit or your for-profit, but it's, you know, your social or your environmental board that comes in with a variety of perspectives. So
I love it. I'll keep you posted.
great.
Because that's a whole nother thing. How do I find people that will actually like have the time to meet with me?
Yes.
It's a whole nother thing. Because usually people who are changing the world are like super freaking busy. And we're all a bit of a hot mess.
We all say yes.
And I know, which is that weird balance of like, we shouldn't say yes to everything, but how can you find the people with the real capacity? But moving on, so last question.
Okay.
What advice that you haven't talked about yet do you have for people who want to pursue their passion or change the world?
Ooh, another good question. So many good questions.
By that time, Liz.
You know, I think Howie Ree, when I told him I was leaving HQ and getting ready to pursue this PhD, he was really, I think he was really helpful in saying that as I was preparing to kind of take this next step, to have that complete clarity, he advised me on kind of doing what you're doing, interviewing, 40 to 50 people who are pursuing similar things to what you are doing, and asking a set of questions and almost doing like a data collection to really get insights as to the pros and cons and potential dangers you might face, the potential challenges that might come up. And I think that was really helpful to thinking about, okay, I really want to push forward these passions and I really want to push forward with these goals. But what are things I'm not thinking about? And how can I bring other people's expertise into the fold to be able to have more clarity as to the direction I want to go? So that informational interviewing process, I think, can be a really powerful tool.
I love that. Well, off camera, I mentioned I'm still working on how to best share these stories, but for me, my ArcBender interviews have completely changed my life. And so yes, I second Liz's advice. Which
Get out
is,
there and do it.
Yeah, interview people. Maybe you'll find your board of advisors. And if nothing else, there's always insightful advice, for sure.
You should put something at the bottom now that says hiring for board of advisors.
I love that. I'll make it happen. I feel like every time I do a new video, I try to just add like one additional feature. So
Pretty soon,
we'll see.
everything's going to be happening on
There's
this.
just gonna be like things flying in the air. Anyways, well, thank you guys so much for checking in. Thank you, Liz, for sharing.
Thanks
your
for having
story.
me.
And we hope this was helpful. Bye, y'all.
Bye.